My parents canceled my 14th birthday party because they wanted to prioritize my spoiled younger brother. I had a brother who was 6 years younger than me, who was diagnosed with high-functioning autism when he was 4 years old. After his diagnosis, my parents started spoiling him excessively. While he looked normal on the outside, he was extremely self-centered and demanding. He frequently used his condition to get whatever he wanted. Whenever I had something, he would want the exact same thing, which resulted in us having duplicates of almost everything, except for the items we were supposed to share. When he had something I didn't have, he would often taunt me with it. When I was 11, I asked my parents for a gaming console as my 12th birthday present. They bought it for me, but with one condition, that I had to let my brother use it whenever he wanted. One day when my aunt was visiting, she witnessed my parents taking away my console and giving it to my brother. My aunt became furious and scolded my parents. Although I got my console back immediately, my parents blamed me afterward. A few days after my aunt left, my parents bought a new console for my brother. During various occasions, including birthdays, my brother would become upset if he wasn't the center of attention. His behavior became so unbearable that other parents couldn't handle it, and we would sometimes get kicked out of parties. As a result, my brother stopped getting invited to other children's birthday parties. At my 13th birthday, my brother threw a tantrum because he wanted to blow out my birthday candles instead of me. My parents asked me to let him do it, but I refused. Thanks to my aunt's intervention, my parents didn't force me anymore. However, my brother tried to ruin my cake. My aunt stopped him, scolded him, and took him back to my mother while he was crying. They promised this would never happen again. The following year, just weeks before my birthday, my parents canceled my party to avoid any potential problems with my brother. I expressed my frustration to my friends, teachers, and even the principal. The news spread on social media, and my parents faced criticism from friends and other parents. As a result, my parents blamed me, but I continued to tell others about the situation. Unable to handle the pressure from others, my parents withdrew their punishment, though they never apologized. Finally, my parents threw me a surprise party at my favorite restaurant. They claimed this was their plan all along, but I knew it wasn't true. I understood it was just their response to social pressure. In the end, I enjoyed a wonderful party with all my friends and received the latest gaming console I had wanted for so long. Although it was clearly a last-minute arrangement, I was grateful. My brother showed his anger openly at this surprise party. However, with many friends and their parents present, my parents finally tried to stop my brother's tantrum, especially when he attempted to knock my cake off the table. For the first time in his life, my brother received punishment. My mother had to watch him constantly to prevent him from causing trouble. Adults had to keep a close eye on him as he repeatedly tried to get close to the cake and presents. Eventually, my mother took him away from the party venue to a nearby McDonald's to distract him in the play area. However, when it was time to leave, it took her over an hour to get him away from the play equipment. In the end, he only left because he needed to use the bathroom, but he still tried to go back. After that incident, my parents never tried to cancel my birthday again. However, for the next 4 years, my birthdays were celebrated only with simple meals at a local pizza place and cakes without my name on them. There were no expensive gifts like gaming consoles. It might sound selfish, but I was disappointed that my cakes never had my name on them. My aunt pointed this out to my parents every year, but they always claimed they had forgotten to request the decoration. I suspect it was because my brother wouldn't eat cake with someone else's name on it. Still, it was wonderful to have a day just for me, since almost everything at home revolved around my brother. Until I moved out at 18, my brother would always throw tantrums during my birthdays, and my mother would have to take him away to calm him down. I had to share my latest gaming console with my brother, but it was mine. When I moved out, I took it with me. My brother became furious about this and kept making a fuss until our parents bought him another console. After I moved out, my parents finally realized how spoiled my brother had become. On his 14th birthday, he exploded with anger because he didn't get the latest gaming console. As a result, he received an indefinite punishment. In his anger, he caused hundreds, even thousands of dollars worth of damage to our home, including throwing chairs around. The last time I saw my parents, they looked mentally exhausted. According to my aunt, they had confessed wanting to send my brother to a boarding school or a military school. However, they couldn't afford to make it happen. I find it ironic that they can't handle the behavior they themselves encouraged. Those who have seen my previous posts would know how my parents tried to cancel my 14th birthday. They fully understood how my brother behaved at parties other than his own birthday. Still, they tried to justify any behavior by citing his high-functioning autism. This overprotective attitude was completely unacceptable to people outside our family. When my brother was around 7, a neighborhood boy had a birthday party. My brother was invited because he was sort of friends with the boy, though perhaps they expected my parents to bring a present. My parents did bring a present, but I don't remember what it was, nor do I care. My parents took me to the party, though I would have preferred to stay home and play games. I sat there bored most of the time, but this allowed me to witness everything that happened with a clear mind. My brother was caught picking up and swinging around items from the present table. When the host mother asked him to stop, my parents defended him, saying he meant no harm. However, knowing my brother's true nature, the host mother demanded our parents keep him away from the presents. While the children were playing various games, my brother constantly tried to be the center of attention. When he got angry that the birthday boy had the right to go first in games, my parents asked the host mother to let my brother go first. The host mother not only refused but warned our parents that other guests would have to leave if they couldn't control my brother. Then came cake time. As the host mother lit the candles and started singing, my brother began shaking the table. Though our parents tried to restrain him, my mother suggested to the host that they should let my brother blow out the candles first and then restart the song. The host mother looked extremely disappointed and asked us to leave. My brother refused to accept this and ran to the table, shoving the cake into the birthday boy's face. The room fell silent for a moment before some children started laughing. The birthday boy began crying, and while the adults were shocked, my parents reacted differently. My mother hugged my brother, defending him by saying this wouldn't have happened if they had let him blow out the candles first. The host mother screamed at us to leave while wiping cake off her son's face. Other children started crying when they realized there would be no more cake. I pulled my brother away from the table, but he tried to escape and knock over the present table. Finally, I apologized to the host mother, who called me a good person but clearly felt my brother was unmanageable. Later, the party was redone with a new cake. After the incident, the host mother handed our parents a handwritten bill, which included a threat to call the police. This became the reason why my brother stopped getting invited to other families' birthday parties. At my 13th birthday, my parents tried to convince me to let my brother blow out my candles. However, my aunt severely scolded them for this suggestion. As a result, it seems they decided not to hold a party for my next birthday. Those who have read my previous posts know how that turned out. My parents even helped my brother steal my mini bike. Time and again, they took away my rights and privileges for my brother's sake. At 17, I bought a used mini bike to commute to my part-time job. My brother got angry because I wouldn't let him ride it. He was rough with belongings and frequently damaged his own BMX bike. His BMX was for tricks and cost hundreds of dollars, which he had begged our parents to buy. However, he never took care of it or tried to repair it himself. I was always forced to fix his flat tires and broken brakes. Though our parents bought parts and provided tools, my brother would barely even pump air into the tires. He would often ask others to do even that simple task. One day, he left his BMX in a neighbor's garage, and it got run over by their van. The pedals were broken, and I had to install new ones. In his tantrums, he would break the rear brake cable and wear down the tires. I had to repair it all on Saturdays, though this should have been his responsibility. Naturally, I had no intention of lending my mini bike to my brother. Especially with rising gas prices, I needed the mini bike, which got 25 kilometers per liter, for my commute. A month before my brother's 14th birthday, my parents called asking me to repair his BMX again because he had worn down the tires. Despite my frustration, I agreed to go when they offered to pay for the repairs. In the scorching heat of 100 degrees Fahrenheit, I changed the tires and sat down to drink some water. My brother was wearing his helmet, waiting for me to finish the work. However, the moment I looked away, he jumped on my mini bike and took off. I rushed out of the garage in shock, but he was already across the street. I considered calling the police, but my parents dismissed it, saying he would return soon. He came back after an hour but immediately took off again. He kept riding until he ran out of gas, and our parents had to pick him up. I was furious, but my parents handed me $200 and promised this would never happen again. I warned them that I would call the police if it happened again. I told my parents that if my brother really wanted a mini bike, they should buy him his own. However, they refused, contradictorily claiming it was too dangerous. The last time I visited my parents' house, my brother was confined to his room as punishment for a tantrum. As a precaution, I had disconnected the spark plug wire from my mini bike. My brother glared at me angrily from his window, but I just smiled and left. Later, I suggested to my parents that they should sell my brother's unnecessary belongings to recover costs. My parents immediately agreed and held a garage sale that weekend. They sold various items including his bicycle, TV, gaming consoles, remote control cars, and drones. His room was left nearly empty with only the bare essentials remaining. This helped reduce the financial burden of cleaning up after my brother's tantrums. My brother came out of his room to look at me, then went back crying. But I could always tell when he was pretending to cry, and this was one of those times. My parents noticed it too and weren't fooled. I asked if they were going to take him to therapy. They said that was the plan. They finally admitted they bore much of the responsibility. They acknowledged this was the result of years of spoiling him. Friends and family had warned them about excessive spoiling. They had been concerned that he would never become independent at this rate. However, I refused to be part of the support system. In the weeks that followed, my brother continued his pampered behavior. He would pretend to cry and even stole smartphones at school. Our parents returned the smartphone to the school, where they were advised to hold a family intervention. They accepted this suggestion and agreed to hold a family meeting. First, the family gathered without my brother present. My aunt spoke first, delivering a well-prepared speech. I read from my own written notes about my feelings. Our grandparents and other relatives also took turns speaking. Our parents apologized to me and acknowledged their mistakes in parenting. My aunt emphasized that this was necessary not just for everyone else, but for my brother's own good. She stressed that if my brother was to become an adult who could control himself, he needed to change now. Then my brother was brought in and seated away from our parents to prevent our mother from trying to comfort him. The family confronted him with their concerns. My brother tried to make excuses, mostly saying everything would be fine if everyone just gave him what he wanted. The whole family repeatedly told him that life doesn't work that way. When my brother appealed to our mother for help, she refused to look at him. He deliberately started breathing heavily and collapsed on the floor. This wasn't the first time he had pulled this act. My aunt told him to stop the theatrics and get up. My brother screamed that we were all ruining his life and wished we would all die. Our parents were shocked by this outburst. He refused to get up and continued pretending to have difficulty breathing. The family continued their discussion while he lay on the floor, occasionally shouting. When the meeting ended and everyone was leaving, our parents had to take him back to his room. He wasn't used to not getting sympathy. My aunt offered to help pay for therapy, which our parents accepted. I hope therapy will have a positive effect on my brother. The background to my brother's birthday incident was that he had destroyed things with a chair in anger when he couldn't get the latest gaming console. As a result, our parents finally punished him severely. Our parents had allowed my brother to take things from me for years. However, things changed when my aunt got involved. When I was young, I hardly had anything that was just mine. As my brother grew older, what he wanted most was money. We received the same amount of allowance. While this seemed fair, my brother got his allowance without doing any chores. Meanwhile, I had to do housework to earn mine. Now, my brother doesn't get any allowance even if he does chores. Still, he always wanted money. He liked getting new things whether he would use them or not, though sometimes he would just save the money. Our allowance was about $25 a month, and I gratefully saved most of mine. One day, I came home to find my room ransacked and my hidden money gone. I had been hiding the money to prevent my brother from stealing it, but he had somehow found it. My mother was home when this happened, but she pretended not to have seen anything. I knew there was no way my parents hadn't heard my brother destroying my room. During the family intervention, I confronted my mother about this. She cried and made excuses, saying my brother was special. When the family pressed her, she finally admitted the truth. My room was close to the living room, and the door was clearly visible from the sofa. This meant my mother must have seen my brother entering my room. When I pointed this out, she repeated the same excuse about him being special. I asked for my money back, but they only defended my brother. My father had the same reaction when he came home, though they eventually retrieved my money. They took it from my brother's piggy bank and returned it to me. My brother screamed loudly, but I knew I was in the right. A few months later, the same thing happened again. My brother ransacked my room and stole my hidden money again. This time my parents refused to do anything, saying they couldn't bear to see my brother disappointed. I argued that the money wasn't his, but my father yelled at me to go to my room. The next day, I rode my bicycle to my aunt's house and told her everything. My aunt came back with me and confronted my parents, asking if they had really allowed my brother to steal. My mother cried, making excuses about my brother being sick and how she couldn't stand to see him cry. My aunt harshly criticized this attitude. She sternly told my parents they had 2 children and needed to care about my feelings too. She pointed out that their behavior was wrong. She warned them that this would teach my brother he could steal without consequences. My aunt asked how much money my brother had taken. I told her the total amount, except for the small amount still in my wallet. My aunt stared at my parents after hearing the amount. My parents tried to make more excuses, but my aunt countered each one. Finally, my parents went to my brother's room, and soon we heard him screaming. They brought back all the money and threw it at me. They blamed me for making my brother cry. My aunt scolded them, saying they shouldn't treat me that way when I had done nothing wrong. My parents picked up the money they had thrown and apologized reluctantly, but I could tell they didn't mean it. My aunt warned them she wouldn't tolerate this happening again. Then she offered to keep my money in her safe at her house. I accepted her offer and started keeping all my savings at my aunt's house. My brother ransacked my room 2 more times looking for money, but it was pointless since everything was at my aunt's house. My parents asked where I was hiding my money, but I wouldn't tell them. When I asked why they wanted to know, my father became defensive. My mother smoothed things over, and my parents stopped asking questions after that. When my brother couldn't find money in my room anymore, he started ransacking the entire house. I was always the one forced to clean up his mess. My parents blamed me for this situation, saying the problem was that my brother couldn't steal from me anymore. The turning point came when my brother ransacked our parents' room. They had a small safe in their room where they kept cash. My brother took the safe to his room and locked himself in, trying to open it. Unable to find the key, he tried to force it open. When my parents entered his room, they found it completely destroyed. Fortunately, he hadn't managed to open the safe, and he was sitting on the floor crying while holding it. My father's face turned red with anger as he punished my brother with a stern scolding. After that, my brother was made to help clean up the house. From that incident on, my brother stopped ransacking my room and our parents' room. However, he still tried to find out where I kept my money. I deliberately acted in ways to mislead him about where my money was hidden. As a result, he dug holes in the garden, searched the storage shed, and even investigated the attic. My parents finally reached their limit and punished him again. Eventually, my parents discovered that I was keeping my money at my aunt's house. However, they never argued with me about it. My brother also learned this fact, but whenever my aunt scolded him, he became powerless to do anything. My aunt warned that if my brother broke anything at her house, she would call the police. Because of this, my brother became reluctant to visit my aunt's house, and my parents also reduced their visits. Instead, my aunt started visiting our house more frequently. I managed to protect my money from my brother until I moved out. However, my brother continued to examine and steal his school friends' belongings. My parents had to apologize every time they were called to school. The school staff pointed out that my brother needed to understand he couldn't touch other people's belongings. My brother tried to excuse himself by saying he just wanted the items, but that wasn't acceptable. At a relative's birthday party, my brother stole money from an envelope. He tried to hide it under his shirt, but was quickly caught. My parents severely scolded him and left the party early. Since the family intervention, my parents have been trying to control my brother. They're also trying to make up for treating me unfairly in the past. They promised to put my name on my favorite cake for my next birthday. When my brother heard this, he silently retreated to his room. Since then, he glares at me through the window every time I visit. My parents are giving my brother certain privileges to encourage good behavior. However, my brother doesn't seem happy about this at all. My father brought out old game consoles and TVs to entertain him, but my brother showed displeasure even with these. My parents are trying, but it seems it will take more time for my brother's attitude to improve. My brother complained that the games were old and boring. My father just told him to do whatever he wanted and went back to his reading. That night, my brother began begging for a 90s gaming console. He used to have multiple gaming consoles, a gaming PC, and a gaming chair with Bluetooth speakers. Now he could only play games while sitting on a folding chair or his bed. When I visited, my brother was playing games in his room, shouting at the TV. He was clearly feeling frustrated. My brother used to love riding his bicycle outside, but since our parents sold it, he had no way to exercise. Our father found a used exercise bike and put it in my brother's room. He also added a CD player so my brother could exercise. My brother would pedal the bike intensely, as if he was taking out his anger on it. I jokingly commented that he was like a prisoner waiting for revenge, but our parents shared the same concern. So our father started making CDs with my brother's favorite music, promising to give him one each week for good behavior. So far, my brother has only earned one CD. While he hasn't been particularly bad, he hasn't shown any notable good behavior either. My brother's dissatisfaction was obvious, and he would give me jealous looks whenever I left. He looked at our parents as if they had ruined his life. The way he looked at me seemed to say he would remember this when he turned 18. I remembered having similar feelings when I left home after high school. However, I had a plan and my aunt helped me achieve it. My brother has no such life plan. I might sound arrogant, but I tried to talk with him. However, my brother has barely spoken lately. I visit him every few days and spend time with him. We don't talk much, but he seems to enjoy playing games with someone. Since our parents don't play games with him, he always hands me a controller when I visit. We mainly play racing games on our father's old console. My brother gets very competitive during games and sometimes swings the controller or pushes me when he loses. I've learned how to dodge his reactions. He still has small tantrums when he loses, but it's better than before. I printed game guides and cheat codes from the library and compiled them in a file for him. Since then, he's become a bit friendlier toward me. Our parents were planning learning activities for him during the summer. However, I warned them it would be counterproductive. My brother was already irritated, and the goal should be to calm him down and help him accept that life would be different now. My father showed displeasure at my comment and told me he was the parent. This led to an argument where I pointed out everything that had happened over the past 10 years. Their favoritism, blaming me, and allowing my brother to steal my money. While I didn't directly call them bad parents, my father backed away. My mother admitted that forced studying wouldn't help. My father left and went to the living room alone. My mother apologized repeatedly for her past actions, blaming herself for spoiling my brother too much. She admitted she had been denying my brother's need to grow up and hadn't thought about his future. My parents made an appointment for couples therapy, but there was a waiting list. My father seemed reluctant about therapy and found it harder than my mother to admit his mistakes. During the family intervention, my father acknowledged his errors, but since then he has been trying to act like a normal parent. I told him pretending the problems didn't exist wouldn't solve anything, and my mother agreed. That was our situation until one day when my father rushed home to find my mother collapsed in terrible condition. This had never happened to her before. My brother was shocked by the situation and became unstable. My father blamed my brother and scolded him severely, more harshly than I had ever seen before. Afterward, my father confiscated the gaming consoles my mother had been hiding for my brother. My mother was taken to the hospital for a psychological evaluation. The diagnosis revealed she was suffering from extreme stress and high anxiety levels. She needed to be hospitalized immediately. I saw a photo my father took before her hospitalization. Her eyes were bloodshot and her face was swollen. There were patches where she had pulled out her own hair. My father told me she had been self-harming, though I hadn't witnessed it myself. Later, my father contacted me and asked me to watch my brother while they were away. He was worried my brother might do something reckless. When I arrived at the house, I found my brother hiding in the closet, crying. He barely spoke to me, only occasionally muttering apologies. I bought his favorite pizza, barbecue chicken with cheese stuffed crust, and coaxed him out of his room. He ate dinner quietly, and afterward, we played games together. While playing, he suddenly broke down crying and asked me if he was really such a bad person. I told him that while much of it was our parents' responsibility, he needed to take responsibility for himself going forward. I explained that his behavior was selfish and violent, and taking others' things without permission was wrong, adding that he needed therapy. He started crying again and told me to leave his room. About an hour later, he came out to the living room, and we were able to talk again. He asked me what it was like to be an adult. I explained adult responsibilities like work, gas money, rent, and bills. He was surprised, saying no one had ever told him about these things. He said he didn't want to grow up, preferring to get whatever he wanted and play as much as he liked. However, he admitted he knew this was wrong. I reminded him that while he used to get everything he wanted, I had learned to make do with less. I told him about hiding money at our aunt's house to keep it safe from him. Our honest conversation continued until our father came home. When my brother saw our father's car, he ran back to his room. My father appeared exhausted and apologized to me with tears in his eyes. He said he couldn't believe what a bad parent he had been and wondered why he hadn't realized it sooner. We hugged, and he cried while telling me about everything that had happened. It's been over 2 weeks now, and my mother still hasn't returned home. I had hoped she would be discharged by now, but she hasn't come back. My father doesn't want to talk much about her condition. I'm beginning to think she might still be hospitalized due to concerns about self-harm. My brother has calmed down and does his chores without complaining when our father asks. Our father returned the gaming console my mother had hidden, but only on the condition that my brother continues his good behavior. My brother understands he needs to work to earn back his privileges. Yesterday, I talked with my brother on the phone. He told me he was afraid of our father, but added that our father hadn't raised his voice once since then. My brother also said he missed his old life. When I asked our father about my brother's bicycle, he said he would buy a new one eventually but was overwhelmed with mother's situation right now. I'm unsure how to handle this situation. While it's clear our family needs support, I feel my brother needs to grow from this experience. I know our father's scolding was harsh, but I don't plan to tell him that directly. I might reconsider her strength while receiving regular counseling. My father adjusted his work schedule to come home earlier and began prioritizing time with family. After many twists and turns, my brother eventually started attending vocational school. He became interested in automotive repair work and is now seriously studying to get his certification. His emotional ups and downs have decreased, and he's begun to think about his own future. My new life has become more fulfilling than I expected. On holidays, I enjoy mountain biking and weekend rides with friends who share the same hobby. Among them, I met John, my boyfriend who is understanding and listens to stories about my past. My aunt remains my trusted confidant, and we meet at least once a month to share updates about our lives. She recently opened a daycare center and keeps busy with that. Sometimes I volunteer at the daycare to play with the children. Somehow, interacting with the children helps heal my heart. The other day, I received an unexpected call from my brother. When he said, "Hey, about the past. I'm really sorry," I felt a bit confused. However, his voice carried a sincerity I had never felt before. I've caused nothing but trouble, but from now on, I want to live by my own strength. Hearing those words left me with mixed feelings. True, the past hurts aren't easy to forgive. But my brother is definitely trying to change now. Recently, my father sent me a photo of a birthday cake that my mother had hidden before. Apparently, for my 14th birthday, she had actually ordered a cake with my name on it. But in the end, she couldn't bring it out because she was afraid of my brother's reaction. Looking at that photo, I could feel my mother's inner conflict from back then. Now we have family dinners once a month. The tension from before is gone, and we can each talk about our lives and futures. My brother has started showing interest in my IT-related work and occasionally asks for advice. John tells me, "Your strength changed your family." But I don't think that's true. We all changed, each facing our own challenges and moving forward step by step. Recently, a childcare worker at my aunt's daycare asked for my advice. They were concerned about how to handle a child suspected of having a developmental disorder. Based on my experience, I talked about the importance of whole family support and appropriate responses tailored to the child's characteristics. What's important is finding a balance between understanding the child's individuality while fostering social skills. Spoiling and understanding are completely different things. As I spoke those words, I could feel my own personal growth. Though past experiences were certainly painful, they made me who I am today. Recently, my father shared some interesting news. My brother has started participating in local automotive repair volunteer work. He's apparently very enthusiastic about activities like repairing wheelchairs and doing free vehicle inspections for elderly people. I never thought helping others could make me this happy. That's what was written in my brother's message. On my bookshelf in my new home, there's an old photo album. Sometimes I flip through its pages, reflecting on past events. But strangely, the photos there no longer disturb my peace of mind. Perhaps it's because I've accepted and overcome the past. John has proposed that after we marry, we move to his hometown in Canada. Starting a new life in a new land, while it makes me a bit anxious, my heart swells with even greater expectations. Of course, not all problems have been completely resolved. My brother still gets emotional sometimes, and my mother occasionally shows signs of anxiety. But maybe that's natural. People don't change overnight, and perhaps it's the gradual process of change that's most important.